Today's topic is on chemical management best practices, how chemical management best practices will bring a paradigm shift on what is going to be the new trend of what the ask from coming from the brands and retailers as well as climate change issues. So, it's small facts about what the fashion industry or what apparel industry is all about. It's of course a 3 trillion global industry, which has been doubling almost every 15 years, and the pace is increasing further. And right now we are talking about 62 million tons of clothing consumed annually. This is of course a good news for all of us, but by doing that, we are having almost 25% of carbon budget only for reducing for 2%, 2 degrees of warming by 2050. We are probably the largest land user of in the industry of apparel, be it growing cotton or the forest. And 20% of world's industrial water pollution is actually attributed to our industry. We use large amount of insecticides and pesticides to grow the feedstock, and also 15,000 identified chemicals which are being used. Not all of them are harmful, by the way, but 15,000 chemicals have been used in general. And if you look at the bad things about this is going to, the worst thing is that 83% of our waste is going into the landfill, and that is a very bad thing. And most of the clothes which are disposed within 30 years of use. So these are our facts and figures when it comes to the textile industry or apparel industry as in general. But when it comes to sustainability, or when we talk about sustainability or sustainable process, sustainable production, we need to understand the baselines. Earlier, we used to have water or energy savings as sustainability. Now there are 9 planetary boundaries which are been created, and every single process and product is actually being evaluated through these 9 KPIs. They could be some things which we know, some things which are newly added. For example, climate change, ozone depletion. So when we are using any chemical which has a ozone depleting substance, then it will impact ozone depletion, and that is where the products and processes should be avoided. For example, one best example which we all know could be spot lifter or use of dry cleaning agent and dry cleaning chemicals, these kind of things, and also the AC compressor gases, atmospheric aerosol loading. So when you are looking at the processes, we are looking at a trend of spray dyeing. And when you are doing PP sprays or something, you will have atmospheric aerosol loadings. So we need to look at all aspects. Though PP spray or spray dyeing could be a better technology, but it needs to be in enclosed thing. What you see in these days, new technologies or new machineries which are coming for garment dyeing, you have mist generation, you have nebulization happening, and you generate foam or you spray, and but these are under enclosed. But if it is being done outside, then we are having atmospheric aerosol loading. Ocean acidification, by the way of discharges, we are having actually acidifying the ocean uh, in a drastic way, not just by discharges but also air emissions. So that is the reason why SOx NOx are under constant vigil, which we need to also ensure that we don't acidify the ocean. Global freshwater use. We need to have a large amount of uh, target setting to be taken to reduce freshwater use. And of course, most of the people are already started this in a big way. Chemical pollution. ZDHC initiatives like zero discharge of hazardous chemicals initiatives has already started to reduce the chemical pollution, which is through the better chemical usage. If you are using a better chemical, then your pollution load will reduce automatically. land system change, biodiversity loss, I would explain you in the next slide, and a biological loading of nitrogen and phosphorus cycles. We all use many chemicals which contains nitrogen. Of course, almost all the dyestuffs contain nitrogen. Not just the dyestuffs, but also fixing agents, quarter ammonium salts. All these will have a large amount of nitrogen loading. For phosphorus, we use lot of wetting agents with detergents, which are phosphate and phosphonate based products. They generate, they produce large amount of phosphorus loadings, and we need to control them, minimize them in a way that at least we are not overloading them and we are not polluting them. So these are the 9 concepts of which are completely relevant for textile industry. When we look at the KPIs or sustainability KPIs. So for example, these days, whenever you are conducting a life cycle assessment of any product or a process or an article, you will be encountering all these aspects of all 9 parameters and see whether the overall impact of the product or a process is positive or negative. So that is something which we need to look into, and these are our new normal 9 KPIs whenever we are looking at the sustainability angle. So how these 9 KPIs are actually uh, relevant to textile industry, which I have already explained. But for example, in the climate change, we did not go in deep. But what in climate change is, whenever we are using fossil fuels, coal-based fuels, it generates carbon dioxide and carbon emission and GHG gases. That will change, that will impact the carbon change. So we need to look at carbon climate change aspect in a greater detail by looking at our fuels. What are our sources of fuels? And fuel switch probably is going to be more relevant these days to ensure that our carbon emission is getting reduced, lowered. And when we are taking a target of 1.5 or 2-degree climate change, climate reduction of temperature, we have a large amount of task or work to be done in this aspect of climate change, so that we use less amount of fossil fuels, be it coal or the oils which we are using for our textile industry in various aspects for the energy production, also for stentors. Then biodiversity loss. I said that I will take it in the next slide. This is something, biodiversity loss and land use is something which we need to look into in greater detail, which is often till now neglected. Of course, under the use of MMCF, that is man-made cellulosics, people are having a large amount of focus on these 2 areas. But if you look at biodiversity loss, because of late, because of some changes, like for example, there is a new trend of soya fiber. There's a new trend of biofuel coming from the corn or corn starch. Agriculture has changed towards commercial crops and not only agrarian. So, and monoculture cultivation. So this has resulted to soil degradation. In order to increase the soil activity, we use large amount of uh, fertilizers or any other chemicals, and that is actually changing the biodiversity. And also we are starting to cultivate non-native species. So this is how the biodiversity is changing slowly in order to increase the productivity, in order to increase the commercial value of the land use. People have gone towards the easy way of producing something what is giving you revenue, more revenue. Like for example, people are changing from some crop to soya or some crop to the corn. That's changing the biodiversity. Then the land use, cotton crop is having a large amount of land use possibilities, and soil degradation is increasing, deforestation is happening, de-esterification of the soil is happening, soil salinization is happening because we are discharging large amount of wastewater also into the soil. So therefore the the culture of the land is changing. The effectiveness of the land is changing. That is why we are now talking about regenerative cultivation. So Patagonia has started. Of course, India is very far ahead in that, in regenerative forestry, regenerative agriculture. And you are seeing India is one of the leading player in the regenerative agriculture. But now land use change is happening because of the cotton, and cotton also uses large amount of pesticides. So that is how the change is happening because of the textile apparel requirements. Coming to freshwater use, water is being used. India probably is one of the few countries where we have large amount of, we can boast on large amount of ZLDs in our factories, in our processing units. And that is why our fresh water consumption probably is much lower than other factories. But we still have a large amount of way forward. We need to do much more than what we are currently doing. But fresh water use is a high concern as of now. Nitrogen and phosphorus flows I already discussed. NOx and SOx is going to be a big issue, be it in producing the fibers or be it in processing the fibers. So in entire supply chain, we are having large amount of nitrogen and phosphorus flowing out into the atmosphere, which is changing the eutrophication and greenhouse gases effects. Chemical pollution, of course, what we used to do and what is currently being coming out, there is a big change, and the number of chemicals which we are using in production processes, which we are fully aware of, is also reducing slowly, because the transparency in identifying what chemical is containing is also reducing day by day. So we need to understand the dyestuffs and chemicals, what is coming in, and at least we should be fully aware of what are hazardous chemicals in present in the formulation, so that we can take an appropriate step and activity on reducing those pollution loads basically. And large number of chemical substances are actually being added day by day. Look at the MRSL, that is Manufacturing Restricted Substances list, which is actually coming out from it, which is already there for almost 8 years now, and or 12 years. RSL is little older than MRSL. The concept of MRSL has started 8 years before, probably, or 10 years before. Now, but slowly the number of chemical substances which are added to the MRSLs are increasing. And this was already because it's not that we don't know about chemicals. We know chemicals, and the chemicals were actually being tested for the lethal dosage or death. If you see, all the chemicals will have lethal dosage LD50s. But we don't know whether what is the impact of this chemical on human health for getting cancer or maybe other organ failures. They are not dying, but they are actually getting some diseases or having health ailments, which was not causing to death completely. So therefore, we do not understand the chemical impact on human health in greater detail till recently. Now, when we know that there are certain chemicals which are impacting human health, we call them as hazardous chemicals, human health or environmental aquatic species as well. Those chemicals need to be understood well and reduce the use of them and control them. That is what is the main chemical pollution. So that is started, that process has started, and that is why we say that chemical management is very important aspect to maintain and manage this aspect. When it comes to the impact of apparel on these KPIs, when you are looking at as a fiber, I'm not talking about MMCF at this stage, but all other fibers, if you are looking at it, every fiber has a particular attribute for one particular aspect. And what we need to look at is what is that fiber which is having the least impact to the environment, overall least impact. So on an average, what is the least impact? So if you look at climate change, nylon could be highest impacting, toxicity acrylic could be highest impacting, cotton could be highest for eutrophication and water use. So what is that fiber which has all overall impact, which will come out from something called as life cycle assessment? And there is also one more thing which is coming out, which is called as preferred fiber matrix, PFM, which is going to be generated from, which is possibly coming out from the textile exchange, which is soon going to be released. And in the textile exchange, PFM is going to come up, and there you will also have MMCF, which is man-made cellulosic fibers, which is which is possibly coming out for viscose, with rayon or viscose, or even the tensile or the excel fiber or lyocell fiber kind of things. Also, it amounts to cupro and acetate fibers as well. So MMCF and all other fibers are being evaluated over all these KPIs, and preferred matrix is going to be released by the textile exchange for in soon. That will come up soon. Now, everyone are talking about circular economy. Now, for circular economy, there needs to be 4 different layers of aspects which we need to look into. The first is, of course, educational behavioral changes. We need to engage in large amount of engagement of education and behavioral changes. Because be it in the designer, be it in consumer, be it in user, or our own people or community of technologists. So this needs to be looked at. Then we need to also rely on policy options for production and design. How the policy which at every stage, including the policy of the governments, policy aspects, so that policies will drive the whole circular economy models. Then business models will look into, like, how do you are leasing what you don't want to use, you can also give it to someone. And you don't have to use everything on your own. So these are coming up very soon, and everything is being looked at in a greater detail. What you can use, what you don't want to use, give it to someone who can use. Something like that. So subletting, you take a rent, but you only use one room, then you let some other room. Things like that. It's also important for not just for our own life, but also for textile production processes as well. So reuse, recycle is the terms which we will be listening to, and completely circular. Now, complete circularity means it's not like it's like zero discharge. The discussion will be how much it will be circularity. Will it be 100% circular, or will it be something circular? So that is what we will be discussing. The discussion is on. Things are just getting mature enough right now. It's not yet completely in rock and stone. It's under preparation and progress, and we are making a large amount of progress in these aspects at this stage. But circular economy and circularity is going to be in the DNA of textile production processes from now on. Then what we look at, chemical management, role of chemical management in environmental impact on circular economy. So let us start with the basic. What is chemical management? Why it is so much talked about? So chemical management is nothing but it is a systematic control, use, and disposal of all chemicals used in the facility. Now, where each term has a specific meaning, systematic control, that means we should be under control, not the chemical. Chemical will control on its own. It has its own control mechanisms. If you don't know about it, it will happen on its own. But we should know everything about that chemical and use it. We are not telling that you don't use it, but control it in a way in which the impact is reduced or minimized. And you need to take it control till it is disposed. When I am talking about disposal till the end of its use, not just till the gate of my factory. So that is where the whole process changes, because you should decide what is the chemical which should come into your factory. You should ensure that when it comes into your factory, you are taking full control of the chemical by taking into the storage, by using and treating in the e-waste water, and then finally disposing. At disposal, so I am actually giving it to my third party approved contractor, and after that what happens, it is I am not knowing. I am paying and he is giving me a certificate. That's what I know. That is not a good control. That is not called as management. You should be fully aware of. You should do in the management systems, we conduct appraisals, right? We all are having appraisal systems. We all are being appraised by my manager or your managers for what you did for the whole year. exactly the same way you need to be doing the appraisal of the chemical, what is in from the state of it is coming in till it is actually put to rest somewhere. It will be probably reused, or it is recycled, or it is incinerated for energy, or it is incinerated and the ash is finally disposed and put into a landfill in the secured landfill area, or that is going into the cement industry, or it is converted into brick, or it is converted into agriculture. Wherever disposal pathway which we are talking about, it needs to be known fully and you should be fully aware of. That's something which is called as full control or systematic control, or and it is considered as chemical management. Traceability of formulations, if you don't know what is coming in, probably you don't know how to treat it or how to dispose it or how to store it. So that is important, the traceability of formulations, both from safety data sheet and back to the manufacturer, who is the manufacturer, because many of the things are not coming from the manufacturers, they are also byproducts. For example, your ferrous sulfate, which is used in your ETP. If you don't know who is the manufacturer or what is the process in which it has been coming out, you probably will not know what are the impurities and how to manage them. So the traceability of formulations is one of the biggest role of chemical management, and you need to review every chemical hazard and ensure that that hazard will not become risk. So you control. So improve overall safety of workers and managing it through control mechanisms is what we are looking at. Full control of the amount of chemicals ordered. That means you should know how much to order. And once you know how much is ordered, you know how much is used. Suddenly the trend has changed. Therefore, I cannot use this chemical any longer. Then I have to keep it in the store and forever. And I don't know after that it will be stored there only for 5 years. That kind of days are gone. Those days are gone. You should be accountable for every single gram which is coming in and which should be used or donated or disposed or reused. But it cannot be stored in your storage area forever and become a expired chemical. It's like a hospital. No one wants a dead body to come into the hospital for treatment. No one. In the same way, once a patient comes to the hospital, we expect that he becomes cured and he leaves your hospital well. You don't expect that it will be dead and then the dead body goes out of your hospital. That's not the expectation. So it's also our expectation that all chemicals come into my factory and they will not be expired in my factory. Ensuring that no chemical gets expired in my factory is also a part of chemical management system. So why to do this chemical management? You may ask, oh, so much are you are asking why you should do this? Because the management systems are created. Why ISO is there? I don't want to actually emphasize right now at this stage because we are gone that stage. We need to do chemical management because we have to reduce the cost and reduce wastages and overages. Overage is expired. Wastages. I wanted 5 kg and the chemical supplier is giving me 25 kg. I have taken it and something will remain and it will be overage and it will get expired, or I have to use 5 kg and I am using it 6 kg because it is a very cheap product. So I don't really care because finally it will be going into the load. It is adding to the load of the wastewater and reduce downtime, creating safer environment, stop potential hazard before it is becoming a problem or risk. You know that this chemical is very highly hazardous, then you should take control of it. You should have all the necessary control mechanisms and systems to manage the either it is a leak or accident or incidents should be controlled, and you make necessary actions to control those so that this will not become a big risk. And it helps the facility to ensure RSL is compliant. All my product compliance requirements are being met. What my brand is asking, what my customer is asking, I probably will be able to manage. In case if you fail, there also is a possibility to have traceability to track down why it failed. So RCS, what we call root cause analysis, can be possible for if you are having a management system, that what chemical you used in, when you used, who used it, at what time, how much you used it, which chemical, which process, etc., etc. If you are able to locate and the lot number of the chemical, then you are able to track down, and it will be easy for you to understand. No one is perfect. Everyone are expected to fail at some point of time. That's how you learn. And once you fail, you should know why you failed, and you have to take corrective actions. And that's where it is called as root cause analysis. Then that will be possible if you are having a proper chemical management system in place. Traceability of chemicals in the entire supply chain. Who is the supplier? Who is the manufacturer? Where is it manufactured? What are the impurities coming out from that manufacturing unit? All these things are coming out of traceability. Finally, access to global market. If you're not able to meet a particular requirement, you probably will not be able to sell in that particular location because you need to follow the local law. You cannot say I am Walmart, therefore I am actually producing in US, therefore all my products can be compliant to China. May not be possible. So you need to follow. In fact, it happened to L Brands in a way in which when they were actually selling the products in US or any other market, at that time they are following the 80cc method of pH. But when they started selling in China, the Chinese pH requirement is the GB method, which is almost like ISO method. They had to change their requirement to ISO instead of A80cc because when they pass A80cc method here, probably some of the articles are not passing the GB method. Therefore, they had to change the requirement on quality so that they can sell the products in the market. It's the same with Turkey or in Germany or anywhere. So if you want to access a market, you need to ensure that you are following the requirements of the market that is coming through chemical management. Now that's who manages it. It's not one man. So most of the times I hear the same thing, that I have one person who is whose role is to manage chemicals. I have kept him the responsibility. I have given him the responsibility. He manages it. It's not going to happen. It's not one man show. It's not one man's job also. The role includes the how you get the chemical in. The chemical is decided which chemical to come, what chemical to come, what should be the specification. Probably the production people will be defining that. Then comes the purchasing people, quotations, specifications, tenders, contracts. Then they will choose who will come, who will be supplying the chemicals with the same specifications. So the purchasing people will come. Once the chemical is ordered, then it will come. Then the store people will come. They will need to store it. After the storage, the workers will come to transport it. After the transportation, the production man will again come into picture to use it. After he uses it, he will discharge and the ETP people will come. In between, if there is anything happening, then the maintenance people will come. And then finally, the role of compliance people will come and the merchandisers will come when there is any failure or anything happen to communicate with your brands and retailers. So all these are a part of this management system, and there should be one person, for example, definitely one person who should be responsible, but it is not his own thing. It cannot be done by one person and the rest of the people are doing their jobs. That cannot happen because it comes from the top-down approach. Leadership commitment involvement is needed. One person responsible should be there. He should be knowledgeable and he is engaging with all the internal and external partners. Who are the internal partners? Who are everyone I've told, including the management, MRMs, wherever it is happening, and all the store, production, engineering, everyone. And external, my suppliers, my customers, my brands, and my sub-suppliers, and my contractors, subcontractors. Everyone are my external partners. So those needs to be engaged. So you need to be responsible, you need to be committing, and then you need to engage and then manage this. So to do this, to start, you will say, okay, where do I start? So ZDHC has come out with a nice system of ecosystem, I will call. It called as ZDHC Chemical Management System Framework Document. So framework document is a document which lists minimum requirement. What are the minimum requirements needed from a brand or a supplier? Whoever is using ZDHC standards, or example, ZDHC member, non-member, doesn't matter, but this document is a very important document for everyone to understand what is the minimum ask. So People can ask more than this, that's fine, but at least what are the minimum requirements is given in this framework. So till now, they were asking many things, but they were not standardized. Now there is a standard document which probably people will be referring to and ask or modify their own ask. Then there is something called as, so you know what is the requirement, that is framework. Now, how to meet that requirement is technical industry guide. So technical industry guide is how to implement, how to manage, how to meet the requirements of asked by the thing. So that is how to, and this is what. So what and how are addressed by ZDHC. Of course, these are first versions, and there is expected to actually update every time. It need not be updated almost like every year. This version 1.0 has come after almost 6 years. The original document, which is called as chemical management system guidance document, which is around 280 pages, and it's a very big document, which is of course very good, but it is not very user friendly. It was not very easily you can take it, and as a mill I can read it and understand and implement. It is a fantastic document. It's the library, it's a dictionary. There's nothing new in this technical industry guide what is not there in that book or in the document. But it now the technical industry guide is become little bit easier for you to understand. It was easier for you to understand, and it became nice methodology to give you instructions and to follow. And not just why I said I chose a term called ecosystem is ZDS is not giving you the document and say, okay, this is what it is. It also is giving you training modules. So if people want to understand what is in it, and if they are not able to read it and understand, then they can understand through the trainings. So ZDHC Academy is giving the training on technical industry guide, which is getting launched this month, actually July, not this month, yeah, July 19th or 17th it is getting launched, and from then on you will have series of trainings which will happen on this particular process. So this will tell you how to implement, and this is going to be more practical experience, like you can take it and then adopt into your system. So as I told you, the framework document is what it has been adopted by most of the brands and the industry supply chains. That is, brand is adopting it, but you are not working directly with a brand, but you are working as a commission buyer. Then your supply chain partner will also be asking the same questions. So therefore, it is irrelevant to you as well. And it is focused on input, process, output. If you want to have clean output, you need to have firstly the minimum requirement is clean input. But process is a very important step. You clean input does not mean clean output. So if we are, sir, I am if I'm having 100% RSL compliance means you need to have 100% MRSL compliance first. That's the minimum requirement. Then the process need to be proper, because the process is an important step. You can use a very good fiber. You can use a very sustainable fiber. Probably I am saying again, MMCF or viscose could be more for sustainable, or even lyocell could be, or Excel can be where good sustainable fiber. But when you are processing it, if you are not using proper chemicals and proper chemical management system, your output will not be good. Now, for example, the output for you is not just the fabric which is dyed. For me, output is dyed fabric, which is productive output, and which are non-productive outputs is wastewater discharged, air emitted, and sludge generated. All these three. So the four outputs, the fabric, the discharged water, and the air emitted, and the sludge generated, all four need to meet the requirements and maintain the manage properly, so that I will not have a polluted environment, and I will meet the requirement of circularity, and I will meet the requirement of the climate change. And when it comes to the sustainability aspect, the overall bigger picture. So don't just look at your output as the fabric or garment. That's not the only thing which you need to look into. So that is why this is important. For example, that is also one of the reason why, in fact, I would like to mention here that with Birla, had actually started something on 2 years before, a program where they have actually chosen 23 or 25 mills who are in their not direct supply chain, because they are only supplying fiber, but they're the mills, which are the wet processing mills, which are actually using this fiber. They went into them and created awareness, created the baseline assessments to see whether where the mills stand on these output areas of wastewater, air emission, and the sludge generation, and created the awareness to the mills and evaluated them and said these are the things to do to meet the future requirements. Because it's not that the requirement, then we also have talked about future requirements, and they have identified which are the mills which are already doing good, and those mills can be chosen as the leaders. So that process already has started 2 years before. 25 mills were done. This pilot was done only in India, but probably this is going to be extended all over, probably to other South Asian region as well. So this process is continuing. The program of me going to the wet processing facilities, and looking at their chemical management aspects, looking at their air emission aspects, looking at their sludge management aspects, and letting them know what are the best practices and where they should focus and look at. And this is free for the mills. It's been almost paid by the Birla in the pilot stage, and then this is how the focus is, that the bigger picture is to ensure that the supply chain of the Birla is completely aware and is ready to meet all the future challenges. That's the aim. So these are the tools which we are talking about on the chemical management framework. Now, when it comes to technical guide, industry guide, this is systematic approach. That means first you should do this. First we talks about policy. Then it talks about strategy. Then it talks about vendor evaluation. That means who should be your vendor for chemicals? Who should be your vendor for substrate? Like, for example, cotton or viscose or your fibers. Then you need to do selection. After you evaluate, you do selection. Then you do management through assessments. You have got the products, then you have to do chemical management assessments, then you do internal audits, then you do look at where your compliance requirements are, hazards are, which hazards can become risk. So you do risk assessment, occupational hazard assessment, risk assessment, root cause analysis, corrective action plan, continuous improvement. All these things are systematically developed and designed in such a way that a particular mill can adopt it in progression, in stepwise. So the role of chemical inventory, how do you use chemical inventory and how do you manage chemicals through chemical inventory, is also been explained very well in by technical industry guide. The output management, that is your wastewater. Currently, wastewater, I would say, air emission standards are yet it is under the, I would say it is still in the white paper in the ZDHC. You can go into the ZDHC website and download this white paper. This air emission guidelines is white paper because during this pandemic, we do not want mills to overburden with some more requirements, additional requirements. But by 2023, it will become the requirement. So right now it is already been added. It is there for you to understand. Prepare yourself. You have 2 years time. In 2 years time, the air emission standard is going to come. That means not just what the emission from the chimney, but also emissions at the centers and the storage areas and indoor air quality, everything will be looking at, everything will come into. So therefore, you need to understand the importance of ambient air, indoor air quality, fugitive emissions, what to check, what are the VOCs which you need to look into in a greater detail is all given in air emission white paper document by the ZDHC website. So those are all going to be part of our output management. Solid waste. Solid waste right now, the guidelines are under preparation. I can tell you that it is a very good document which is going to be prepared and coming out soon. Soon could be this year itself because it is almost done. Now you will understand the sludge. When we are telling that the zero discharge of hazardous chemicals means hazardous chemicals should not be discharged in water, and you are using some hazardous chemicals. I do not want that hazardous chemical to go on to the fabric because RSL needs to be met. The RSL is for the output fabric or garment which you are making. I don't want that to be hazardous. Then where the hazardous chemical will go finally? Either it will transform to non-hazardous small scale, smaller outputs, or it will go into the sludge. Now, in case if it is going into the sludge and the sludge is hazardous, then how to manage hazardous sludge? How to send that hazardous sludge to a proper disposal pathway? Now, what could be the disposal pathway? One could be that you will use it for agriculture. That means your land use. One could be construction. It could be any construction, could be cement, could be ceramics or whatever. Then what you use is probably in the construction, there are two different possibilities, but otherwise you will use it for energy. You will burn it, incinerate it and generate energy. But when you generate, when you burn, you will also probably get some ash out of it. So that ash you need to also look into and test it. And if it is hazardous, then that ash should be properly landfilled. Secured landfill, what we call with secured landfill with proper vector controls. So these are the disposal pathways. To understand what you are generating, solid waste, and identify what are the attributes of it, and then choose the proper pathway. So that is what is going to be given in the ZDHC guideline for you, that in case if your sludge is this particular, the requirement is this, then you should only choose a particular pathway. This pathway could be only secured landfill. If it is highly hazardous, it will only go to secured landfill. It is non-hazardous, it can go into agriculture. So that possibilities are given clearly in the guideline document. It's going to be coming soon. And it's same thing, air emissions I already discussed. So you are getting prepared from the documentation process, from the SOPs, record preparations, incident registers, emergency response plans, and occupational hazard assessments. Everything is getting ready for is coming out from this document. If you read this document, understand it well and implement it, you will be able to prepare all the required documents for meeting the requirement of chemical management. Now, looking at that, now this is what we understand. Then what are the brands requirements currently? Brands are asking for supply chain transparency. I want to know where the spinning mill is, where the weaving mill is, where the bales are coming from, where is the cotton field, etc., etc. The transparency part and traceability part is becoming more and more visible by the brands, and you cannot say that I will not tell you where I am taking it from. I will give you this price. No longer that is appropriate. Sustainable raw material use is the ask, because in most of the brands have already taken by 2025, 80 or 100% of the cotton should be sustainable, or 100% of the fiber which they will be using should be sustainable source. And the use of the term sustainable for individual brands, they have explained it in their own way. So Walmart wants either BCA cotton or organic cotton or cotton from Americas, things like that. That is for cotton. And MMCF, they have already approved some of the viscose MMCF viscose partners, and they have said that if it is coming from them, it is sustainable, like that. So sustainable raw material use is going to be increasing. So you cannot dictate that I will use this only. The brand is going to tell what you can use and what you cannot use. Use of renewable energy sources, that is going to be the new ask now. People have started asking you what is your energy source. Right now, they probably are not insisting, but they are already asking what is your energy source, tell me. Are you using coal? There is no more coal boilers which will be approved probably in future. So reduction of fresh water use already started. I think 3 to 4 years already people have started, and they are already giving targets to mills that I want you to reduce 10% water, 20% water, 30% water. In fact, some of the brands have taken 50% reduction of fresh water use by 2025. So these are, I think now IKEA also has come up with their own water use plan. VF also has come up, H&M has come up, C&A is going to come, Inditex already started. So there are so many brands who are already using fresh water use as a target ask. Use of safer chemicals, you all have already been experiencing. Those who are from mills, they experiencing safer chemicals used from almost like from the DHC started. Reduction of GHG emissions is a new ask. People are starting already because most of the mills are using HIG FEM, and in the HIG FEM they are actually recording the total GHG emission every year on year, and they also are supposed to take target of reduction, and they are supposed to achieve that target. So if you as a mill you are going to adopt HIG, then you need to take it in a systematic way that today I am here, my baseline is this, and I am using this is my emission currently. This is my plan to reduce, and this is what I have achieved after a year. So that is how people are already started. Many brands are going to ask for GHG reductions, and also along with, because most of the brands have taken their own science-based targets, and there they have their own GHG reduction targets. Now, brands GHG reduction target will ultimately will come to you as a target. You means the mills, their supply chain partners. If I am the supply chain partner and I am the father and I have got a target, of course all the children will also get in the house their own targets, individual targets. Someone will get more, someone will get less, but depending upon what it is. So the same way, reduction of GHG target emission is going to come soon. In fact, it has already come. I would say it has already come. 2019 is the starting point probably, and from then people are going to ask at least by 2030 you need to be this, by 20%, by 30%, 50%, etc. Safe work environment. There is so many audits which are happening every day in day out, including safety audits, including social audits, product safety, your RSL, inventory, chemical safety data sheets, transparencies, all these things going to be looked at, RSL testings, etc. Reduction of waste generation. This is going to come soon. In fact, this is what people will be now focusing more on. How much you are wasting, because under the circularity, the waste is going to be your raw material. Now, the waste reduction means not the waste which can be reused or recycled, the waste which is going to the landfill. Reduction of landfill waste is going to be very specific. In fact, PVH has told very clearly zero landfill waste or zero waste. That means zero landfill waste by 2030. Now, by 2030, they want all their mills to be zero landfill. And I have seen one particular mill in for leather in UK, which is zero landfill. They don't have any landfill waste. They've converted everything to reuse or recycle or generate something to retransform downscale, but it will not send to landfill. So reduce, recycle, reuse, zero landfill waste is what is going to come soon. Now, these are the asks, but how do you achieve it? Now, you can achieve it only by resource efficiency. You cannot say that I am using a good chemical and my zero discharge is happening, then I will meet everything. It will not be possible. You will have to use resource efficiency and process optimization as a big resource to ensure that you will meet all the requirements or asks coming from the brands, because you will always say, oh, brands are always asking, they will not pay me, they will not charge anything extra, but I need to pay large amount of cost. Everything is costly. So how do I save? How do I meet it? The only possibility is resource efficiency, optimization, process optimization. You need to use chemical, you need to use the process, you need to use the machinery in such a way that you will reduce ETP loading, you will save time, you will have energy saving, you will have water saving, you will generate less waste, so that you will meet the requirements and the savings on a long run. Some cannot be giving you direct benefits, some will give you indirect benefit. Intangible benefits will be many. But raw material selection, dye stuff selection, chemical selection, process selection, machine selection is an important aspect. For that, you need to have good process expert. Do that along with the chemical management, then you can slowly achieve the targets or ask coming from the brands. Now, what is expected to be future? In future, I am expecting use of renewable energy. Renewable energy means things which are not finite, means like coal or oil. Okay, fossil fuels are not. So non-fossil fuel energy sources like our biomass, like our briquettes, biomass briquettes, or the waste, the rice husks, etc., etc. These are renewable sources. Then there is something called as, but remember one thing, renewable sources, do not mistake. Renewable sources are not having zero GHG emission. They are having small amount of emission, but it is not zero. Now, green energy like solar, wind, tidal, or micro hydro or hydro are zero emission. So when it comes to green energy source, they are considered as zero, like solar or wind or tidal or the hydro, micro hydro kind of things. But when it comes to renewable sources like biomass, etc., they will not be completely zero, but it is drastically lower than what you are using currently from the coal or the oil. Then taking target of GHG, focusing on GHG reduction through science-based targets. So that means people will start asking you soon. Already in the HIG FEM 3.0 this year, they have added in the energy section, they have added in cell level 3 already science-based target as a question. Even though that is not scored at this stage, but it is going to come next year or next year, it will be scored. People wanted everyone to look at your GHG emissions currently, take the baseline, start taking your target to reduce over a period of 15 or 20 years. That is a target which people are looking at. Now you need to ensure that by 2040 or 2035 or 2050, you have zero carbon, carbon neutral. That's what we are looking at energy. Now, water, increase water recycling and reuse practices. That means we are talking about blue water reduction. So you will do rainwater harvesting. You will harvest the rainwater and you need to reuse. You have to regenerate the water and you need to also ensure that the groundwater should be reduced. The blue water should be reduced. Now, gray is good. The gray water should be reused, recycled. That means today, tomorrow, we are going to be looking at India is way far ahead because of the courts. The court made us to be following the ZLDs. Now, brands are going to slowly ask you that I want you to become ZLD across all the globe now. In the case of wastewater, the wastewater discharge should be meeting ZDHC guideline. Now, that's not all. ZDHC guideline is having three-step process. First is foundational, means you will also meet the requirement of the local law, but also meeting the minimum requirements, the foundational. Then progressive, beyond foundational, beyond local law. Progressive, that means you are going towards improvement. Aspirational, best in class. So what brands are asking now under the DHC wastewater guidance is not just foundational, oh, you are meeting foundational, but you are expected to do that. Now you can say, oh, I meet foundational requirement, then brand will not say, oh, very good. You are meeting foundational, you are super good. No, they will say, oh, you are expected to do that. When are you becoming aspirational? Tell me that. That is what people are going to ask you now. So it requires some planning. If you have already installed a wastewater system, wastewater treatment plant, to meet the aspirational limit, it takes a lot of energy and lot of investment and planning. And that needs to be looked at and that needs to be managed. Then we talk about achieving zero discharge and hazardous chemicals. Then we look at reduce sludge, air emission. When it comes to that is new, air emission. Track and improve on air emission. That means you need to track first what are your air emission contents. It's not just SOx, NOx or PM, but also VOC something. So that needs to be done. Then we need to also look into the waste reduction. Then we need to look into the chemicals. So chemicals part I already discussed, but there is one point which you also need to look at is what is going to come after meeting the level 3 chemicals use. That's going to be screened or scored chemistry, sustainable chemistry. That means chemicals which can save you energy, time, water say use, etc. So it's not just using safer chemistry, but it's also sustainable chemistry. So chemicals which are safer and also we reduce your process time. That's something which we need to look into. Then finally, I wanted to also introduce you something on circularity, which is actually being prepared by Phil Patterson for C&A Foundation or Laudes Foundation. And there he says that we should now adopt chemical circularity model, which is now we are using linear, which is like chemical industry produces, textile industry uses it, and finally it will be disposed by the discharge. The non-linear model is that whenever you are using any chemical at the stage of fiber or yarn or fabric, it should be remove the chemical from there what is not needed and only pass on what is only required. One example is sizing. What is in the case of weaving, you use size, and for the weaving we require a size. After the weaving is done, the fabric is made, the size is of no use because the fabric is ultimately desized there in the factory. So the weaver, where the weaving is happening, if he is able to, he knows what is the size which is added. And if after the sizing is over, he desizes it and he recovers the size and reuses it. So that the fabric which is coming out of the weaving process is not passed on to the dyeing unit where the load of the size is going into the wastewater. And he will not be able to reuse that waste. It is all mixed. So therefore, this kind of remove the chemical what is not needed, add the chemical what is only needed, and send back to the chemical. That kind of model is CURE model. What is CURE model? Chemical user responsibility model. If you are using responsibly, use it and remove it at a time when it is not needed, so that someone will be able to recover and reuse. That kind of model. Also, one more example is lanolin. In the case of wool, when lanolin is extracted from the raw wool during the scouring, and if you don't reuse it, it's all gone into the wastewater as a load, chemical load. But if you can reuse and recycle and reuse it, then that chemical can be used in cosmetics and pharmaceutical. It's also the same thing. I can give you on and on many examples, but here I would like to stop for any more questions if you have.